Hey, night owls, draw the curtains, dim the desk lamp, and settle into that perfect pillow-propped listening slouch, because we're about to sail straight into the wet black heart of the North Atlantic, where the toughest raiders who ever shaved their heads with an axe blade just discovered that even a longship full of berserkers can run out of luck. Before we cast off, quick moment of ship's business. If you like drifting off to terrible historical truths, hit that subscribe bell like it's the prow of a rival longship. Drop a comment telling me your time zone and what you're snacking on. And just like a Viking shield wall, let's see this sleepy channel hold fast together. Ready? Good. Let's push away from the dock and listen to the creak of rawhide lashings and the hiss of icy spray against oak. You can almost smell the pine pitch and old sweat in the shields overhead. Imagine the year is 885. Moonlight glitters on 100 overlapping rivets. We're stowed in the prow beside a pile of round shields, knees jammed against the dragonhead stem post. Our commander, a scarred Dane called Halfdan Iron Render, who claims he once cracked a Frankish knight's helmet just by headbutting it, has spent weeks boasting about the fattest, softest monastery he's ever heard of, a hidden one. Ruled by monks so wealthy they polish their own bell clappers with beeswax. Word is these brothers store enough silver in their crypt to sink an Oseberg ship. Easy pickings, or so Halfdan thinks. We shove off from a fog-soaked cove on the coast of what future cartographers will call northern Scotland. Salt air needles our lungs. Ropes bite our palms as we haul the dragon prow into deeper water. 30 oars punch in perfect rhythm. Splash, hiss, breathe, splash, hiss, breathe. Our lead drummer, a man with arms as thick as barrel staves, keeps the pulse steady with a mallet carved from walrus tusk. The prow cuts through floating slush from last night's sudden hailstorm, until the shore is a slate-gray smear and only sea and sky remain. Now you, listener, are wedged between two hulking rowers whose tattoos still ooze fresh ink. You can feel their ribs expand with every drawn breath. Smell the iron of their chainmail, the sour churn of barley gruel they wolfed down before dawn. The deck beneath your rawhide boots shivers with each oar stroke, and though you're bundled in wolf pelts, the spray still finds you, stinging like blacksmith sparks. Hours slide by. The sun never climbs higher than a dull copper coin behind clouds. We pass skerries where gulls scream like lost souls, dive for fish, then scatter when they smell humans. Halfdan squints at the sky, sniffing the wind like a warhound. He mutters that Odin is pleased. The tide, the breeze, the omen of gulls flying inland, all good. We row harder, but then a shape rises on the horizon. Not land. A sleek dark shadow slicing towards us, riding the crests with a confidence that chills the bones. Another longship? No. The prow is wrong. Instead of a dragon, a broad beak guttered with copper plates. The oars flash not in triples but in organized banks of 4. And on the deck, painted crimson shields with strange knotwork we don't recognize. Halfdan's growl dies in his throat. His second in command, Bjorn Two Throats, spits into the wind and says the one word every Dane hates: Norwegians. Turns out we're not the only predators stalking this coast. Rumor has it that King Harold Fairhair's western warlords are sweeping south, taxing every raiding crew they meet, preferably after sinking them first. They'll demand tribute, trading silver for promises of safe passage, and if you refuse, they'll lash your captured helmsman to your own mast and let the sea decide justice. Halfdan swears by the 9 worlds he'll never yield his plunder, but we haven't even stolen it yet. The monastery, that honey pit of relics, might already be burning under someone else's torch. Our drummer hesitates. The oars fall out of sync. Water slaps awkwardly along the hull. Everyone stares at Halfdan. He orders full speed, straight toward the newcomers. His plan? Bluff. Pretend we're here to parley. Offer them a share of tomorrow's loot in exchange for alliance tonight. Meanwhile, he'll judge their strength. The ships close. Waves slap the gap between hulls. We can see their faces now. Shaved bald except for braided topknots, eyes lined with black soot to cut the glare. They grin, a row of cracked teeth gnawing on chance. Their Jarl, Olv the Red, raises a painted drinking horn in greeting. Halfdan responds with a salute of his own, an axe lifted high, frost still crusting the blade. Words fly across the waves in Old Norse too thick for foreign ears. Olv demands 1/3 of all treasure we find on land. Halfdan counters with 1/10. Olv laughs, spits, and says we have 2 choices. Pay half now, or lose all later. Halfdan's lips curl. He looks back at us. Our oarsmen tighten their grips. the tensions sharp enough to slice the clouds. But then, a sudden boom of thunder behind us. We all flinch. A storm? No, the sky is still iron gray. The noise came from the direction of land. Seconds later, a second blast, deeper this time, rolling across the water. Everyone turns. On the horizon, the faint silhouette of a stone tower, its top blossoming with smoke. The monastery's bell tower shaken by some explosion? Impossible. Monks don't wield black powder. More likely, defenders. Maybe the Scots have cannon? Or the Irish? Impossible, again, in 885, yet something roars. Halfdan's face pales beneath his battle paint. Ulf's grin disappears. They know that sound is not of mortal forging. Some say Thor's hammer strikes. Others whisper of new siege engines imported from the Frankish Empire. Either way, that monastery is no honey pit, it's a hornet's nest. Without a word, both captains yank their helms around, telling their helmsmen to pull away. But pride is heavier than gold. Which crew will retreat first? Which Jarl will boast back home about driving rivals off? The oarlocks creak in hesitation. Here, listener, you feel the boat sag between two choices. Risk unknown fire or risk rival blades. Behind us, the smoke thickens. The boom echoes a third time, closer. Splinters of rock rain into the sea. Some invisible giant is flinging boulders. Everyone smells brimstone. Halfdan snarls, "Odin, take us forward." Ulf orders retreat. There, decision made. Our prow turns toward the tower of smoke while the Norwegians backwater, their oars churning foam. Mocking laughter sparks across our deck. But is it confidence or terror disguised? We row. The drummer pounds double time, your lungs wheeze in icy gusts, each breath cuts, yet still you haul. The coastline crawls closer, revealing cliffs mottled with caves. Atop the headland, the monastery. Stone walls, small windows like arrow slits, and at its heart, a squat tower belching soot. Another thunderclap. Closer, so loud your chest rattles. A splash to starboard. A marble slab the size of a cow crashes into the surf, thrown from a hidden catapult, perhaps. Water drenches the oarbank. But Halfdan laughs, mad with glory. Rich monasteries defend themselves, he bellows, but no stone can stop a Dane from silver. Finally, the keel grinds onto shingle. We leap into knee-deep surf, dragging the longship ashore. Wet sand sucks at boots. Your legs tremble with cold, but adrenaline surges. We're committed now. Ahead, a narrow goat path zigzags up the cliff. We scramble, shields first, axes strapped across backs. Clatter of iron on rock echoes. Halfway up, arrows whistle. One thunks into Halfdan's thigh. He roars but climbs. Our shield wall forms, overlapping planks deflecting shafts. We push on until we see them, not monks, soldiers, wearing quilted gambesons, round helms, and bearing crossbows, Frankish style. Mercenaries hired to guard holy silver. And behind them a strange device, giant arms laden with tension ropes, crank handles glinting brass. Ballista maybe? But no, this beast is smaller, designed to hurl heavy slabs at ships. Halfdan realizes too late. We're not raiding a monastery. We're storming a fortress disguised as one. Those bells were bait. The sacred reliquary rumor planted by these mercenary orders to lure greedy ships like flies to honey. He bares his teeth, yanks the arrow from his leg, and orders the charge. And you, listener, are shoved forward, boot heels sliding on loose shale. Ahead, bolts whistle, men scream. The first rank crumples, the second surges. The mercenaries load, crank, release. Another slab arcs overhead. It mashes a Dane whose name you never knew. Just a wet crunch. Still we climb. At the lip, we crash over the parapet like surf. Swords ring, crossbows drop. In that blur of carnage you don't think, you swing. Axe meets helm, edge bites flesh, someone yanks your shield. You punch, their nose bursts. You live another heartbeat. Then, from the far side of the courtyard, a familiar roar. Ulf's Norwegians. They followed us after all, hoping to scoop treasure while we bleed. The defenders now trapped between two raider tides. The courtyard swirls into chaos. Iron over iron, blood on flagstones echoing beneath dawn's drizzle. Listener, breathe. Feel the slick fear underfoot. Smell the sweet copper tang. Know that by dusk, somebody will stand over a mound of corpses and claim victory. Silver will flow or not. Yet that thundersling may still have ammunition, and those mercenaries fight for coin but will die for it too. And so ends our first waking nightmare of how the deadliest Viking raiders finally met their match. Not in kings or storms, but in clever bait and rival greed. We're knee-deep in part one's mayhem, and the story has only just drawn its sword. We're inside what was supposed to be a silent house of prayer, but the courtyard looks more like the mouth of hell, flagstones smoking with spindle-thin wisps of vapor from spilled entrails. The mercenaries, Franks for sure, by their nasal helms and quilted gambesons, have tried to pull back to the cloister arcade. Hear that barking chant? Latin curses, half-remembered scriptures twisted into war cries. They shove forward two small pavises, boards bristling with quarrels already lodged in their fronts, and reload hand-cranked arbalests. Those crossbows don't just punch holes, they staple limbs to walls. Halfdan bellows for our shield press. You and I jam shoulders, raising overlapping oak planks, edges already notched. His plan: use our battered wall as a battering ram, dump us straight into the arched walkway where the Franks can't angle the torsion sling overhead. It might work if the Norwegians don't stick axes in our spines before we breach. Behind us, Ulv screams something about splitting profits. We don't answer. We can't spare breath. The shield wall surges, thunk, quarrels hammer the boards. The force shudders our bones. A bolt tears clear through someone's plank and half buries in the shoulder of the man beside me. Egil, I think, a gangly youth with one eye still swollen from ship frost. He bites down on pain and keeps pace, blood speckling his beard. You feel the vibration pass along locked arms, like a drum skin beaten from inside. 5 paces left, 4. The mercenaries brace pikes behind the pavises, too narrow to swing axes. Halfdan roars, "Now!" The front row drops shields and lunges. I follow, because hesitation gets you skewered. An axe blade bites the top edge of a pavis. A Dane uses it as a grip to vault straight over, landing boot heels on a Frank's skull with a crunch. You duck under, thrust forward with a Sikh's knife, feel cartilage part. The taste of stomach acid creeps into your mouth. Suddenly, the Norwegians crash into our rear ranks, not attacking us, but using our human wedge as cover. Ulv knows there's safety in numbers, as long as numbers belong to someone else. His men stab over shoulders, hacking at the same Franks who are hacking at us. We're a chaotic meat grinder chewing forward. Mercenaries collapse back through an arched door into the refectory. We spill after them. Inside, long trestle tables upturned into barricades, candles still guttering pools of wax. Wall-painted saints gaze down in shocked silence. Saints who never pictured their feast day like this. We kick over benches, stumble on fallen loaves, trudge through puddles of spilt meat intended for monk's breakfast. On the far side stands the ballista crew. 3 Franks manning a squat torsion frame, crank handles spinning. They're not aiming at us. They're wheeling the engine toward the main nave door beyond, as if expecting something worse. Halfdan forgets the loot. He wants that machine disabled before it fires again. He bulls forward, then the floor booms. A hidden trap? No. The nave doors fly open, and in stumbles the abbot. Picture him, tonsured head, robes torn, face smeared with wood ash. He carries a gilded reliquary chest bigger than his torso, straining, and behind him a line of ragged monks dragging sacks of coin and reliquaries toward the ballista, as if to load them. Halfdan laughs, a terrible, delighted bark. The Holy Brothers are trying to evacuate their treasure on a siege engine cart, rolling it out a postern door, but there's no time. The Danish-Norwegian tide surges, then the unexpected. The abbot drops to knees, slams his palms together, and cries out in crisp Norse, "Parley!" His accent is rough but clear enough. Every axe falters mid-swing. You can taste the tension shift. Halfdan wipes sweat streaked with someone else's blood from his eyes and signals for stillness. "You speak our tongue," he snarls. "Then you know what we want." "Yes," the abbot pants. "I know you want silver, but you also want glory and songs and a story that will follow you to Valhalla." His voice quivers, yet somehow echoes in the vaulted hall. Monks behind him tremble like saplings in wind. The abbot claims he can grant both, fortune and fame, if we spare his brothers. There is a crypt beneath the tower, he says, older than the monastery, carved by Picts before Rome heard of Christ. In that crypt sits an iron-bound casket too heavy for 10 men, sealed since the time of St. Columba. Inside, relics beyond price, or curses. Local legend says whoever opens it unleashes a Draugr plague. But prophecy means nothing to pagans eager for silver. Halfdan's eyes glitter. Ulv scowls. He doesn't share loot he can't see. The abbot senses the rift and raises one trembling hand. Only 30 men can descend the ladder. Too narrow for more. Choose wisely. A gamble. He's pitting us against each other. Halfdan nods slowly. 15 of mine, he declares. 15 of Ulv's. The rest stay topside. Ulv's protest dies when Halfdan reminds him whose ship outnumbered whose on the water. Begrudging agreement. We form up, you and I among Halfdan's chosen because we're still breathing and not yet limping. The monks light rush torches. The crypt entrance hides behind a votive screen featuring painted angels, now cracked. We duck through onto spiral steps hewn from rock, slick with moss. The torch smell is rancid, tallow blended with damp like wet dog hair. Steps wind downward until the air turns cold, colder than outside. Breath fogs, bones perhaps centuries old, are wedged into niches along the wall, skulls staring at our procession, each torch flame guttering blue at the edges. At the base, a cavern opens, rough pillars, stalactites dribbling. In the center squats a casket the size of a market cart, banded with rusted iron, etched runes half eroded. It's strapped to a wooden sledge. The abbot's voice above trembles. Open it, and the past wakes. Halfdan, Ulv, and you ignore him. Prying bars slip between lid and base. Metal screeches, dust plumes. When the lid cracks, a breath of stale air sighs out, smelling of peat smoke and old honey. Inside, 3 nested boxes, each smaller, the innermost of gleaming black glass. No one dares lift it. Halfdan does. His hand closes, he grunts at the weight. Ulv's eyes reflect torch flame like a wolf's. The abbot shouts from the stairs, "Do not disturb that vessel. It's St. Fergus's midnight tears, crystallized plague, sealed since the famine." Halfdan scoffs at superstition. Ulv, though, has heard such tales. Relics laced with powdered curses. He steps back. Halfdan laughs louder, calls him coward. Mutiny ripples. Ulv's men growl. One Norseman swings at a Dane, splitting his collarbone. In seconds, crypt stone rings with clashing steel. You dodge a blade, slam torch base into a stranger's knee. He howls. Another Viking topples a torch. Flames lick ancient straw at pillar bases. One spark, then many. Smoke spins upward. Halfdan's focus never leaves the black box. He tucks it into his fur cloak, ignoring skirmish. Ulv bellows and lunges for it. Their axes meet midair, clang, sparks. You see Halfdan's earlier arrow wound split, blood-soaking leggings. Ulv is fresher, his sword strokes faster, but Halfdan is heavier, shoulders like slabs of oak. They grapple, boots skidding on wet stone. The box clatters, spins, slides toward an open fissure, crack barely big enough to swallow a man. Your eyes lock on it. If that thing falls, instinct overrides greed. You dive, catching the box edge, but momentum carries you, arms over the abyss. Torchlight reveals no bottom, just black. A hand grabs your belt. Eagle, one-eyed, the young Dane. He yanks. Ulv's boot stomps your wrist. He intends to pry out the prize. Flame smoke claws your lungs. Overhead, timbers crackle. Suddenly, Halfdan rams Ulv from behind, both roaring. The Norwegian slips, tumbles sideways, striking his temple on rock. He goes limp. Halfdan heaves him against a pillar, looks about with wild eyes, roars for retreat. Everyone scrambles. Eagle helps shove the black box into your arms. You cradle it against chest, not daring another drop. We stampede up the spiral. Smoke chases. At the top, Franks and monks gape as soot-stained pagans explode from below like hornets. Halfdan growls at the abbot. Path, and shoulders the clergyman aside. We barrel through a side cloister, down a corridor lined with cracked tiles depicting Eden. Somewhere behind, the crypt floor booms. Maybe a pillar falls. Part of the ceiling trembles. Outside, courtyard carnage is silent. Bodies where we left them. The Danish longship still moored on the shingle far below. But the cliff path is choked with Norwegians guarding their retreat. Ulv's remaining men see their Jarl missing and howl at us. They'll avenge him first, sort treasure later. A standoff. Halfdan steps forward, blood soaking his trouser. He hefts the black box high like a holy wafer. Your Jarl failed. Follow me instead. Share riches beyond dreaming. Some hesitate. A clever offer. Give them hope of spoils and they might switch banners. But one Norwegian, broad as a bear, face painted red, spits and hurls a throwing axe. It thuds into Halfdan's ribs. He staggers, box still aloft, drops to one knee. Chaos again. Our Danes scream, surge, arrows fly. You yank Halfdan's collar, drag him backward behind a stone trough. His breath rattles. He presses the black box into your hands, wheezes. Carry it to the ship or smash it and curse them all. Choice slams into your chest like a warhammer. Do you risk plague? Do you spill potential fortune? Halfdan's eyes dim. He coughs blood. Meanwhile, Eagle and 3 others rally around, forming a small shield knot. You clutch the vessel. It feels warm now, oddly pulsing. The monk's prophecy gnaws your mind. Midnight tears, sealed famine. Decision. You nod at Eagle. He understands without words. 2 shield bearers cover your flanks. Together you sprint for the goat path while remaining Danes form a rear guard. A boulder zings past. An arrow grazes your calf. Pain flares but doesn't stop you. Feet hammer shale. Heart hammers louder. Halfway down, the wave crash drowns pursuit. You slip, slide on loose gravel, nearly pitch over edge, but Eagle's grip steadies. Below, the longship rocks in surf. Only 3 sailors left guarding it, wide-eyed at our return, missing half the crew. We splash through shallows, toss the black box onto the deck. It lands with ominous thud. Sailors mutter signs against witchcraft. An arrow streaks, shattering the steering oar. Another hits a rower's thigh. Norwegians crest the path behind, war cries rolling. Eagle yells for cast-off. We heave the prow around as two Danes on the cliff top chop the mooring ropes. The ship drifts, then rides a swell clear. Oars dip, bite. Water turns white. On shore, the monastery tower suddenly belches a column of smoke darker than before. Flames crown its roofline. Whether from torches, ballista mishap, or crypt fire, we cannot tell. But stone crumbles. A bell breaks loose, crashes down the cliff, spraying shards. The sound echoes across the inlet, a dirge for all futures lost inside. You collapse onto the rowing bench, arms numb, the black box resting like a sleeping demon beside you. Eagle slumps too, staring wide at it. Open? He whispers, but nobody moves. Only when the ship's hull rhythm settles and the shoreline shrinks behind fog do you feel the box's surface cooling. The pulse fades. Maybe it was just your heartbeat. Or maybe the relic sensed distance from its grave. Night falls before anyone speaks again. The remaining Danes count heads, 12 souls. Of Halfdan, no sign. He never reappeared on the cliff. Ulv presumably bled out below. You, once a nameless oarsman, now clutch the prize that cost 2 crews and a holy fortress. Sailors look at you differently. Fear tinting greed. Finally, you stack driftwood torches amidships and gather around. Someone suggests casting the box overboard to appease sea spirits. Another argues to open it. Silver would buy a kingdom. Eagle turns to you. You pulled it from hell's crack. Your choice. And so we end tonight's second vigil, the sea yawning like a dark god beneath our hull. Will you pry those iron bands and risk whatever saintly curse coils inside? Will you hurl the whole fortune into the abyss and sail home broke but breathing? Or will a third path beckon? Find a wizard, ransom it to kings, maybe spark a war bigger than any Viking dreamt. No one's rowing. We've let the sail luff slack to keep the vessel drifting northward on a slow tide because oar beats echo too much like heartbeats, and everybody is listening for something worse than surf. Eagle, one-eyed, sinewy, loyal beyond sense, sits cross-legged across from you, a whetstone hissing along his seeks just for the comfort of the noise. The others, Bran the lantern thief, Kettle frog kicker, Guthrum the younger who still smells of milk, and 7 more whose names you barely caught in the chaos, hover around the mast in a ring of jittery silhouettes. They keep glancing at the black box lashed at your feet, as if it were a viper, yet none of them moves to get farther away. Terror and greed both have gravity. Wind slides through the rigging with a whisper that sounds like someone murmuring Latin prayers. The displaced monks promised plagues for thieves. Sailors remember. Bran spits into the bilge to ward off spirits. Guthrum traces Thor's hammer across his chest, then after a guilty pause, sketches a crooked cross too, hedging bets. Superstition is thick as tar tonight. You clear your throat, every head jerks. We can't drift forever, you say, voice low. Fresh water runs thin, and if we limp into any harbor with half a crew and a relic we don't understand, the local lord will gut us or ransom us. Choices, open it, sink it, or hide it until we find someone who'll pay in silver, not blood. Silence, only waves slap. Then the oldest survivor, skeggy, hair-like seaweed, speaks from the shadows near the stern. He's missing 2 fingers, and rumor says he once served in York as a rune scribe. I know a woman, he rasps, a Scythecona in the Orkneys. They call her Saga Sealer. Pays high for rare lore. She'd bargain for the box, maybe lift the curse, or lay a new one. But reaching her means steering west through weather the gods used to sharpen lightning. Egil nods. Better odds than prying it here. Bran disagrees. Better to crack it now, share what's inside, and be done with fear. He taps the iron bands with his boot. The metal rings like a muffled bell. Everyone flinches, half expecting the sky to split. Your gaze sweeps faces lit by a single fat-wick lantern guttering on the mast peg. Every man looks one good nightmare away from madness. The decision's shoulders belong to you by right of salvage, or so Eagle keeps telling the rest. But authority sits on your shoulders like wet bear hide. At last you offer compromise. We sail at first light for the Orkneys. 2 nights rowing if the wind holds. If weather turns foul or crew start dying of bad dreams, we open at mid-sea and take our chances. Murmured assent. Bran shrugs. Greed can wait 48 hours. Guthrum sighs relief. Even the dark seems to ease a notch, as if some listening spirit is pleased with a plan. Any plan. With that, Egil orders watch rotations. You volunteer first shift. Trusting anyone else alone with the box feels like inviting Heimdallr to mischief. The others curl like cats along the benches, cloaks pulled high. In minutes, the deck becomes a graveyard of snores and nervous twitches. The lantern sputters. Its halo shrinks. You settle beside the reliquary, fingers brushing iron clamps, cold. But as the ship rocks, there's a faint warm throb beneath the metal, pulse of some sealed heart or just the illusion of night-numb palms. You press your ear to the lid. Silence. Then, faint scratching? Could be mice below deck. Could be memory. Hours slide stars wheel, cold dew beads on beards. Just before dawn, Skeggy relieves you. You hand over the watch, feet tingling with pins. You stretch, stumble toward the bow for a moment of solitude, and freeze. 10 strides ahead, Brand crouches over the chest, pry bar wedged under an iron band, working silently. You move, slipper light, but he hears the deck creak. His head snaps up, eyes gleaming amber in lantern glow. Couldn't sleep, he whispers. Figured I'd peek, just a peek. If treasure's harmless, we waste time sailing west. You raise open palms. Brand, step back, we agreed. He grins wolfish. Agreed? We voted with fear, not sense. With a grunt he levers, iron groans. Something beneath the lid chimes like glass struck. Skeggy shouts from aft. Eagle jolts awake. You lunge. Brand twists, shoulders colliding. The pry bar slips, smashing his thumb. He howls. The bar clatters overboard. But the lid gap widened finger width. A hiss of stale air escapes, and lantern light dims as if the flame inhaled the darkness. A smell follows. Honeyed wine gone sour, peat bog water, and faint roses. Sickly sweet. Brand staggers back, clutching thumb. See? Harmless. Then he retches, doubling. From the shadows, Guthrum cries, "Shut it! Shut it!" You shove the lid closed. Eagle rushes, hammering wedges of driftwood into the seam. Brand collapses to knees, sweat streaming, eyes rolling white. You push him onto a bench. His pulse races. Moments later he convulses, vomits black mucus flecked with blood. Terror spirals through the crew like winter wind. Kettle Frog Kicker drops to deck, sobbing prayers. Skeggy snarls, "Plague relic." The abbot spoke true. He grabs tar pitch and smears a warning rune on the lid, a sigil for binding rot. Brand spasms slow, breath rasps. You wash his brow. Nobody else steps near. They stare at you, captained by circumstance, waiting. You announce, "Raise sail." We sprint for the Saithkona. No more debate. No one argues. Wind favors flight. Canvas snaps full. The longship keels, spray sheeting over rails. Daylight crawls, pallid sun revealing bruised clouds. Brand drifts fever sweat. His thumb wound blackens. By noon his breath rattles like loose lid pins. He mumbles words from childhood. Second dusk finds Orkney's outline. Jagged cliffs, heather-stained slopes, stone brock ruins like shattered crowns. A wyvern of storm clouds coils overhead but holds its rein. Our sail thrums, carrying us into a narrow firth where gulls cry over kelp-slick rocks. Skeggy points to a turf-roofed longhall alone on a promontory, smoke curling thin and green from its chimney. "Saga Sealer," he says. "We beach at twilight. Air smells of ice and sea rot. Brand cannot stand, eyes filmed. Guthrum and Kettle craft a stretcher from oars. Meanwhile, Eagle and you unlash the reliquary, now triple bound with rope, pitch, and hopes. Touching it feels like handling winter stone. The earlier warmth is gone or sunk deep. A narrow sheep path wends up the bluff. Torches flare ahead. 2 cloaked figures approach. One carries a staff of rowan wood twined with silver wire. The other, a rawhide lantern whose panes are thin sheets of brown calf parchment. When they halt, sea wind whips their hoods back, revealing the Saithkona, hair white as dulse, eyes pale green with pinprick pupils. Her companion is skeletal, jaw painted with blue woad to resemble a grinning skull. Neither seems surprised. "You bring sickness," the Saithkona says, voice like peat smoke. Skeggy bows stiffly, mutters introductions. She waves him silent, gestures at the box. "Set it there, between land and tide line. Relics taste which world they crave." Brand moans. She spares him a glance. Too late for the greedy one, perhaps. We lay the chest on damp shingle. She kneels, presses ear to iron, murmurs in some Pictish tongue. Then she spits brine onto the lid. The spit steams. Egil grips his seeks until knuckles blanch. Saga Sealer rises. Inside is no saint, no silver. It is a shard of hunger, what the famine monks called the pale tear. Powder of ergot rot locked in glass tears. One breath drives men to visions, eats their blood like frost eats sap. Kettle gulps. "Can you cure our friend?" She studies Brand, pulse faint, lips black. If his breath still remembers warmth, perhaps. But you must decide the relic's fate. Bury in earth of 9 nights' depth and 9 wolves' skins. Barter it to scholars who will kill for a taste, or surrender it to the sea that birthed the plague mists. Wind gusts, rattling her staff bells. You realize all eyes again rest on you. Leadership is a chain heavier than mail. Choice 1, profit and risk. Choice 2, secret burial. Choice 3, return to depths. Brand's chest hitches. He whispers silver through cracked lips. Guthrum weeps softly. They shared watch duty. Egil steps close to you. Captain, none of us want that curse aboard again, but if we sail home empty, Halfdan's kin will call us cowards and kill us anyway. He glances at Skeggi. Maybe barter half to the Seithkona. She claims lore. She might pay. Saga Sealer hears, nods. I will trade runic iron worth a king's cloak and healing draughts for the wounded. I keep the tear sealed beneath standing stones. The world sleeps easier. You leave richer. Deal tempting. But distrust lingers like chill water in boots. What if she means to weaponize plague? Yet leaving with nothing may doom the crew to vengeful clans who expect spoils. You clear throat. Heal Brand first. If he lives by sunrise, we'll bargain. Her eyes glint, but she agrees. The skull-pink companion unfolds a hide bundle of herbs. Mandrake, angelica, crow garlic. They mash, steep in iron cauldron hung over driftwood flames. Steam curls sweet bitter. They bathe Brand's thumb, smear paste on his lips. He trembles, then sighs. Color creeps back to cheeks, black streaks fade to ash gray. Crew murmurs awe. Night deepens. Saga Sealer bids us camp on shore. Her hull is warded against relic taint. Eagle sets watches. Nobody protests. You slump beside a drift log, eyes gritty. The distant reliquary squats under moonlight, shrouded in sea mist like a crouched bear. Dreams come hot and vivid. You walk through barley fields turned to bone-white stalks, sky swirling with ash flakes. A bell tolls under the soil, each note feeding worms. A black tear drips from your eyelid onto the ground, where it sprouts silver coins that melt into screaming mouths. You wake before dawn, heart hammering, taste of roses and rust on tongue. Camp stirs. Brand sits propped by oar crutch, weak but alive. The crew's relief is palpable. They crowd him, clap shoulders. Saga Sealer arrives bearing a chest of iron rings, each etched with protective runes. Payment, she says. Save enough to quiet Halfdan's kin. She gestures at the box. My guardians will enter it under tide and stone. Decision finished. By mid-morning, 4 of her masked thralls haul the reliquary toward standing stones perched on the cliff's brow. They chant low as surf. Egil leads our men in silent salute. Warriors honoring a foe too foul to face blade to blade. You feel weight lift from lungs, though a sliver of longing bites. Fortune drowned, legend smothered. But maybe legends that stay buried are kinder to those who live. At noon we push off, sail belly full of steady western breeze. Brand waves weakly, head swathed in linen. Skeggi fingers his rune rings, lips moving in half-remembered sagas. Guthrum laughs for first time since the Abbey. Before the Orkney headland sinks below waves, you turn aft, watching the cliffs fade. Somewhere beyond that horizon, a plague sleeps again. You hope the earth never rolls enough to wake it. Crew settles to oars. Egil claps you on shoulder. Captain without crown, he chuckles. But men will sing how you outfoxed death itself. You smile, thin, wary. History's songs edit horrors into heroics, but the screams you heard under Abbey stones will keep you humble. Evening paints the sea copper. Gulls wheel overhead, free of curses, hunting fish. You call the crew together near the mast. Friends, we carry scars and sorrow, but also iron rings worth safe passage home. We can buy back our dead's honor, give widows comfort, and sail again another season. Murmurs of approval, eyes shining. You add, yet tales matter too. When we reach the Scald's fires, tell them the truth. Greed almost doomed us, unity redeemed us, and sometimes the richest treasure is the breath left in our lungs. They nod, solemn. A lesson etched deeper than axe cuts. The longship glides east under star-speckled dusk. Spray kisses cheeks salty but sweet. For now the wind is kind, the deck feels whole, and nightmares stay behind Orkney stones. The gulls had scarcely vanished into the lavender haze behind our stern when dawn bled gold across the bows, and with that soft light came the first uneasy sight of home. Capes of dark basalt, cottages pressed to the shoreline like limpets, and most ominous of all, a thin coil of smoke rising from the mead hall where Halfdan Ironrender's kinsmen kept vigil. It was not the smoke of breakfast hearths. This was darker, angrier, the sort kindled for mourning or for forging spearheads, meant to argue with fate. Egil signaled silence. No victory horns, no hail of joy. We stole into the river mouth beneath torn sails dyed rusty with salt and spray. A ship that looked less like a raider's prize and more like a survivor's confession. Brand, still bandaged, insisted on standing at the prow so that the clan's first glimpse of us would include the man they'd once called Luckbringer. But luck now clung to him like a loose tooth, and every third breath rattled. We dropped anchor at the village pier. Already figures gathered, women in rough flax gowns shading eyes, children perched on eel baskets, 3 gray-bearded jarls scowling beneath wolf fur cloaks. At their center towered Sturmir Halfdan's son. broad as a doorway and twice as unyielding. A great hammer rested over his shoulder. Its head was etched with interlocking boar tusks. Family crest turned threat. No one spoke while we unloaded the iron rings. 30 in all, each big enough to slip over a brawny wrist, every one scratched with the Seithkona's runes. They clinked into a heap that gleamed like captive moonlight on the pier boards. Sturmir's nostrils flared. Eagle stepped forward, palms up. Payment for Halfdan's share, and for those who fell. His voice carried, steady as keel timber despite the hush. Sturmir's gaze skimmed the rings, settled on the bandage peeking beneath Eagle's sleeve, black bruise where he'd shouldered the relic. Silver is dumb, Sturmir growled. Tell me in words why my father's brother lies under foreign earth, while you breathers bring trinkets. He advanced. The crowd parted like grass under hoof. You felt the crew tense behind you, hands drifting toward hilts, but steel could only worsen this. So you matched Sturmir's stride, heart thudding. Your uncle died free, you said, hammer in hand, buying the rest of us moments to escape a plague no blade could cut. His courage kept the curse from these shores. Let that be the saga. Sturmir searched your eyes for weakness, finding only fatigue, he grunted. He jammed the hammer butt to the pier with a crack that sent gulls screeching. Then, surprising everyone, he slid a ring onto the haft, honoring the fallen as equals instead of spoils. The saga will be sung, he said at last. But if whispers reach me that you sold half-truths for profit, I'll hang your tongues from the shield wall. The threat felt oddly merciful. You nodded, aware a heavier conflict still lurked. Fear. News of a plague box spreads faster than wind in rigging. Mothers would clutch children tighter, traders would shun our silver, and winter would stalk every hearth if panic took root. So for 7 days we spun simpler tales. We told of a monastery overrun by sickness, of brave men retrieving holy ointments and trading them for rune rings. We praised Halfdan's charge and Ulf's last stand. We omitted the tear. The village mourned, feasted, and slowly exhaled. Fishermen repaired nets. Goats bleated again in thin mountain pastures still slick with spring mud. Yet sleeplessness haunted the survivors. Brand woke screaming of black-eyed monks crawling through deck planks. Kettle shunned ale because the froth reminded him of disease foam on Brand's lips. Even you, self-reliant to stubbornness, found your dreams stitched with silver coins that melted into mouths. When Eagle suggested a purification rite, rare among Norse but whispered in the south, you did not laugh. Anything to cut the shadow's tether. The village seeress, grow a bone reader, prepared the rite on a windswept headland where whale skulls bleached beneath endless gull cries. She arranged a circle of ash, oak, and rowan. Each of us placed a personal token into the center. Egil his whetstone, Brand a tuft of his own charred bandage, Guthrum the shell he'd carried since boyhood. You laid down the tiny iron key the monks had used to lock their reliquary cupboard. Souvenir turned burden. As the sun slid behind bruised clouds, Groa intoned sagas older than Odin. Flame leapt from oils, sparks spiraled skyward like fireflies seeking home. When she smashed a clay jar of salt water over the pyre, a hiss rose, the same hiss you'd heard when Brand cracked the chest. But this time the sound drifted upward and away, into gull wings and sighing reeds. Afterward, something loosened. The air felt less watchful. Egil even managed a grin around his scared eye. The crew walked back to village in companionable silence, touches of laughter skipping ahead like pebbles over calm water. 2 weeks later, Sturmir summoned you to the longhouse. Feasting benches had been cleared, only torches and a weather-stained map remained. He pointed to a ragged circle drawn around the northern cape. Ships vanish here, he said. Sails found floating, hulls missing, bones washed ashore stripped of marrow. Some blame pirates, others witch storms. I blame nothing until I see it. He jabbed a finger at you. Your men faced plague, darkness, and lived. Sail with me, find truth for our coast. He offered coin, sure, but coin was secondary. Something in his eyes, respect grudging but real, pulled at you stronger than silver. Besides, idle hours bred memories. A fresh quest could chase them off like dogs before a torch. Egil, when told, chuckled. From Nightmare Box to Ghost Fleet, at least fate keeps us guessing. The crew voted, none abstained. Brand, still growing strength, begged inclusion. You hesitated but nodded. Steel hardened by fire cuts truer. Preparation spun frenzy, stores of dried fish, casks of barley ale, lengths of rope new twisted. Groa gifted each man a pendant of rowan wood carved with a warding knot. Sea devours those who forget they too are prey, she warned. Good advice masquerading as riddle. Departure morning dawned bright, gulls diving for herring below glassy swells. Villagers lined the pier, even children waved scraps of wool. Sturmir's longship, Raven's Fury, cut a regal figure, prow carved into a swooping bird whose amberstone eyes seemed to spark under sunlight. Our own battered hull, quickly caulked and rebannered as Windweaver, would flank him. As moorings were cast, you climbed the prow for final words, both to crew and, unseen to the listeners curled beneath blankets across time. Every voyage, you called, begins with something left behind, be it fear or comfort. But we sail north not to chase death, instead to pin it down so our kin may sleep easy. Sturmir gives muscle, we give memory. Together we bind the unknown. You caught Sturmir's faint smile. That alone felt omen enough. Hours melted into oar rhythm. The sea, though calm, rang with cold that crept under fingernails. By dusk the cape loomed, cliffs jagged like dragon teeth, forests of pine above whispering in laments. Mist patched the water, sculpting ghost shapes that formed and unformed. Raven's Fury signaled halt. Both ships hove to, lanterns shuddered. Eagle cupped a hand to your ear. Hear that? Nothing. No gulls, no wave lap, as though the ocean held its breath. A soundlessness thick enough to choke. Sturmir's horn brayed once, deep, mournful. Echo died too fast, swallowed. Then, from the fog, a glow. Lantern? No. Green, floating waist-high in air, drifting closer. Another blink behind it, then three more, a string of eerie beads. Brand whispered, "Willow the sea." Shapes emerged, hulks of ships half-submerged yet gliding, timbers sagging but propelled by unseen oars. They circled wide, herding us. On their decks stood figures of tar-slick black, eyes glowing like embers. Not men, statues, wraiths. Eagle's hand found yours on the rail, squeezing once. "We face it," he said, steady. Sturmir roared orders. Our crews readied spears, arrows dipped in pitch, hearts pounding hollow drums. One phantom bark slid alongside so near you smelled rot and salt mingled. Up close, the deck figures resolved. Sailors, yes, but wrapped in tar-drenched canvas, mouths sewn shut with copper wire. Their lanterns dangled from ribs exposed through slits in cloth. Dead crews chained to ghost keels, condemned to patrol. Why? How? Mysteries for scholars, if scholars ever heard this tale. For now, survival trumped explanation. Eagle loosed a flaming arrow. It struck tar, whooshed into hungry blaze. A corpse jerked, wire snapping. The fire spread, racing rigging like festival ribbon. Screams erupted, not from stitched mouths but from the void, high and distant, as if the sea itself protested. Other ghost ships closed, hulls bumping ours with nightmare-slow inevitability. Tar corpses toppled across rails, clutching, dragging men toward decks slick with death. Steel met ribs, sparks sang. You fought side by side with Sturmir, hammer and sword carving circles of red. Brand, fever spent, drove a spear clean through two bodies at once, shouting Halfdan's name. But numbers pressed like endless surf. Then you remembered the Seithkona's rings. Their warding runes burned icy against your chest. You ripped the pendant free, pressed the wood to a corpse's brow. It hissed, smoldered, and the tar shell cracked, leaking brine that steamed away. The corpse sagged dead again. This, then, was the key. Rowan and flame. You bellowed the discovery. Rowan pendants flashed across decks, pressed to tar. Eagle smashed cask lids for makeshift torches. Fire and wood turned tide. One by one, ghost vessels caught blaze that green lanterns could not quell. Finally, the fog itself blushed red, curling away. When dawn clawed across wreckage, only two living ships floated. Our decks stank of ash and sweat, but the sea aroused itself, lapping waves like normal water again. Exhausted cheers cracked hoarse throats. Yet victory carried ransom. A single tarred corpse remained, pinned by spear to our mast. From its stitched lips hung a scroll case of shark skin. Carefully you cut it free, prying open the cap. Inside lay a parchment older than conquest, written in monkish Latin and Norse kennings intermixed. Rough translations spoke of a brotherhood of the Quiet Wake, who embalmed plague victims in tar, exiled them upon cursed currents so their breath would never meet land. Those currents circled this cape, an eternal quarantine broken only when greed or curiosity trespassed. Sturmir stared at smoking horizon. We burn what's left, raise markers of warning, and speak this lesson to every shore. The crew nodded, battle sober. The capes would bear new cairns, maps would ink fresh crossbones where none dared fish. Evening of that long day, while sails snapped homeward, you gathered listeners, both on deck and, through unseen candle glow, curled behind screens miles and centuries away. You've drifted with us through fog thick as memory and stood where dead men guard the line between plague and hearth, you murmur. If you wish to know whether the Quiet Wake truly sleeps now, or if deeper tides still stir, press the like runestone, scribble your musings below, and ring our seafarer's bell so you're aboard when next the prow nose into dusk. Should your eyelids weigh like anchor, let surf hush your dreams tonight, knowing that somewhere a cape of dragon teeth glints, and brave fools tend its fire. Night fell in layers that evening, each darker hush drawing you down from waking triumph toward a quieter, more intimate dread. With the last embered glow of the ghost fleet dead astern, Raven's Fury and Windweaver rode an uneasy swell beneath blank, star-swallowed heavens. No moon, no wind, just the creak of rigging and the muffled scrape of rig pins, turned by sailors who moved as though every footstep might snap the world in two. You drifted the decks until even the pitch-smeared rails began to look like crawling shapes. Then finally, exhaustion pinned you near the mid-mast. There, Brand lay half-propped against a coil of rope, his skin stark as drifted snow except where tar burns marbled his forearm. He was awake, eyes bright and unfocused. "See it?" he whispered. You followed his gaze. At first nothing, just the horizon's ink edge. Then, like a faint oil shimmer, a band of pale green rippled low across the north. Auroral light, perhaps, though you'd never seen it so far south. For Brand, though, it echoed the ghost lantern glow. He shivered, and you pressed the Rowan amulet against his palm until his fingers folded around it. No words, just the warmth of living flesh to remind him that here, aboard this battered wood, life still outranked whatever haunted horizon skies. At dawn, whispers wove across both ships, water casks half empty, salt pork barrels swelling with rot, and the wind still absent. Raven's Fury normally drank from 2 freshwater barrels each day. Both now stank of brackish slime no one dared taste. Guthrum knelt beside an open cask, sniffed and jerked back as if slapped. "Tide's inside," he muttered. "Clean water turned to sea. Ego looked to you, always to you when the familiar rules fail." "Currents have shifted," he offered, "or the casks leaked." Yet his face betrayed doubt. Wood staves don't leak upward. Something ancient and spiteful had followed us from the wake. Styrmir ordered sails furled tight to conserve crew energy. He set teams to scraping barnacles from hulls and checking lines, busy work to keep hands from trembling. Meanwhile, you and Egil spread parchment charts across a deck crate, tracing a route southeast toward a fjord rumored to hold a freshwater spring right at shore. It meant shaving dangerously close to reefs, but thirst made the choice simple. Before noon, a breeze teased the rigging, faint but promising. Sails blossomed. By mid-afternoon, both ships surged toward the fjord's narrow throat, a sheer-cliffed passage half hidden behind a skeletal sea stack that looked like a giant's finger wagging warning. From the crow's nest, Kraka called down that breakers slammed the reef in chaotic spirals. Raven's Fury veered to port, searching deeper water. Windweaver followed. That's when the fog returned, not rolling, but dropping like a curtain so fast you could swear you heard it hit the deck. Visibility shrunk to arm's length. Oars were called to ready, the cadence steady yet anxious against the hull. Sound carried strangely. The dip of our oars echoed back at odd angles, as though other crews rowed in parallel, just out of sight. "Line to Fury," you ordered. A heaving line arcs through vapor, thudded unseen, then jerked taut. A moment later, Styrmir's gravel timber echoed back. "Tide." For an hour you inched, guided by muffled surf booms and the creak of mutual rope between ships. The fjord mouth should have appeared by now, or at least the looming cliffs. Instead, you drifted in a cotton womb where time pulsed sluggish. Crew voices thinned to hoarse murmurs, thirst cut tongues like gravel. The water ration had been suspended at dawn, and lips now split crimson. Brand collapsed at the steerage, delirious. You knelt, tipped the last sip from your skin onto his cracked mouth. The Rowan pendant still nestled beneath his fingers, but his breathing rattled wet. "Fresh water soon," you lied with conviction so strong you nearly believed it. Then the line to Raven's Fury snapped. A jolt shivered the rail. Eagle fell against the mast. Shouts erupted through mist, confused, scattered. You called Styrmir's name. No answer. The fog seemed to swallow voices mid-breath. "Sound the horn," Egil urged. You lifted the curved ram horn and let fly a blast. The reverberation rolled outward, then returned doubled. An echo or a reply? Hard to tell. From starboard, oars struck something solid. Clunk, scrape, then splintered. A reef. But charts placed reef's port side. You leaned over, squinting. Ghost-pale stone jutted inches beneath the surface, striated in spiral ridges. It looked unnatural, like the spine of some drowned behemoth. More segments rose ahead, forming a jagged labyrinth. "Back oars," you cried too late. The current, an undertow you'd not felt until that second, dragged Windweaver forward. Hull ground against ridges, sparks of pain and timbers beneath your feet. Men scrambled, but the pull was relentless. Then, as abruptly as it began, the current died. Fog thinned into tatters that whirled upward, unveiling a sight that stole breath. The fjord's mouth wasn't cliffs at all, but a cluster of colossal whalebone arches thrusting from the seafloor, an ossuary reef built of leviathan ribs. In their hollows hung swaths of kelp and tattered prayer flags, scrawled with runes. Beyond, at the basin's heart, crouched a stone structure, ringed terraces descending like an inverted tower, each tier cut with steps etched in serpentine patterns. Water spilled down those steps in silvery veils into a central pool that glimmered turquoise even beneath gray sky. And there, anchored against the lowest stair, floated Raven's Fury. Relief surged, then hesitation. For a sacred well it felt wrong, too pristine, too silent. But thirst excused caution. Lines were cast to secure Windweaver beside the other ship. Crew disembarked onto slick stone, boots echoing. The pool beckoned, mirror still. Eagle knelt first, cupping hands. You grabbed his wrist. Test it. He dipped a fingertip, tasted. Eyes widened, not alarm, but bliss. Sweet as birch sap, he murmured, downing handfuls. Men rushed forward, buckets filled, skins gurgled. Brand gulped greedily, color blooming in cheeks. Even Sturmir, stoic rock, drank, then breathed a laugh. The god's gift at the edge of despair. While the crew reveled, you explored. Carvings along the outer terrace depicted scenes. Robed figures guiding tar-wrapped bodies into boats headed for sea. The same quiet wake sect. In one panel, a woman with antler headdress poured water from this very pool onto a sick child who rose hale. Water of cleansing, perhaps. But another panel chilled the spine. The same woman kneeling before a giant skeletal serpent whose fanged jaw dripped dark water into the pool. The inscription below, half Latin, half runic, roughly translated, life and death, drink from the same mouth. You hurried back. Already men were filling second skins. You called Sturmir aside, pointed to carvings, his brow furrowed. He glanced to the pool, now clouding where stirring feet had muddied silt. A shriek split the air. Guthrum clutched his stomach, eyes bulging. He fell, convulsing. Another sailor collapsed, foam at lips. The water in barrels turned yellow-black, swirling like oil. Brand vomited a rope of blood. "Spit it out!" you roared, but panic had them swallowing curses along with poison. Eagle retched, staggering. Sturmir seized a bucket, hurled it across the terrace, commanding men to purge. You dragged Brand to a step, his rowan pendant burned hot. "Rowan," he gasped. "Fire." The memory struck. Tar corpses dissolved under rowan heat. Could this water's curse share origin? You ripped torches from sconce holes along terrace walls, ancient but still stuffed with resinous reeds. A spark from flint set them ablaze. You thrust one into the pool. Water hissed, recoiled, turning from black to smoky gray. The stench of rotten brine rose. Sturmir caught on, plunging more torches. Where flames touched, corruption retreated. Some sailors crawled from edge, coughing. Others lay still. Eagle pressed a torch to Guthrum's chest. Steam curled as sick water seeped from pores, leaving him gasping but alive. Soon the entire pool boiled, not from heat but from something writhing beneath. The water parted and upreared the skeletal serpent of the carvings. Huge spine, skull lined with lamprey teeth, fleshless yet sinewy with black kelp veins. It thrashed, scattering men like dice. You met its empty sockets with iron key steel resolve. Raising the torch, you charged across slick stone, jabbing for the eye cavity. Fire bit bone, splintered. The serpent shrieked, a sound that shook terraces. Sturmir hammered vertebrae. Eagle flanked, slicing kelp ligaments. Torches rained until the creature writhed into steam and cinder, dissolving back into the pool which now drained through cracks in terrace floor, emptying the curse out to sea. Silence fell, broken only by pained groans. But the water left in skins had cleared, pure again as if the serpent's hold broke with its bones. You tested. No foulness lingered. Survivors sipped cautiously, and hope returned like birds after storm. Counting heads, you wept to find 14 gone, swept by serpent coils off terraces into sea abyss. A heavy ransom, but not total ruin. Guthrum lived. Brand, though pale, could stand. Before leaving, Sturmir insisted on destroying the well. Terrace pillars toppled with levered spars, stones crashing until no basin remained to tempt future fools. You hammered the last prayer flag beneath rubble, a warning sigil carved. Drink not where death slakes thirst. Back aboard, sails filled with a merciful breeze toward home. That night, under burgeoning stars, Eagle joined you at the stern. 2 curses in one voyage, he said. Either we're hunted or we're meant to learn. You stared into darkly waves, perhaps both. He grinned despite bruises. Then let's keep learning. You turned to the unseen audience riding every jot of this saga. If these fireside wanderings still hold your eyelids open, you murmur, tap the old rune of liking, strike a comment, tell us which ghost tide chilled you most, and lash yourself to our crew by ringing that subscribe bell so you never drift adrift when next we weigh anchor. Sleep pattered the deck like handfuls of millet spilled from some careless god's granary, each tiny impact drumming your eyelids heavier than the last. We had been running before a fitful nor'easter for 2 nights, the kind that gusts only long enough to shove you off balance and then disappears, leaving the sails limp and crew uncertain whether to cheer or curse. The horizon ahead was a rumpled quilt of iron-gray swells. Behind, the ossuary reef had long since dwindled to a half-memory, yet its bitter tang still haunted our throats whenever we sipped water from the newly blessed Sturmir stood braced against the tiller, a slab of silent determination. But even his shoulders had begun to sag beneath the weight of what we carried. The serpent's fanged skull, lashed with rawhide to a cross-spar and shrouded in damp sailcloth. He insisted the trophy be brought home, not as a boast but as proof, so that farmers and fishwives would heed warning stones and keep clear of the cursed cape. It jutted there now like a captive storm cloud, the linen occasionally lifting to reveal bone white as bleached coral, teeth curved like crescents of new moon. Every time a flap stirred, Brand flinched, and Guthrum crossed himself with hesitant fingers. Morning stole in on the sly, paler than it had any right to be, and with it came a sudden cry from Kraka up in the crow's nest. Driftwood ahead! No! A hull! Eyes snapped skyward, then forward. Through the gauzy haze you spotted a low shape bobbing. As Windweaver closed, details sharpened. A small merchant cog, sails shredded to ribbons, masts snapped but still attached by rigging like a broken limb stubbornly hanging on. No crew, no cargo on deck. Just a smear of rust brown along the gunwale that looked disturbingly fresh despite the cold. Sturmir grunted orders, and we hove to, lines ready. The plan was simple. Board, search for survivors or clues, strip anything useful. The execution felt less simple once Egil and 2 oarsmen clambered over. Your palms sweated on the rail as their boots hit the silent wood. Moments stretched. Then Egil waved beckoningly. You crossed last, cutting the gap with a single plank. The merchant's deck tilted underfoot, swollen seams weeping brine. The brown smear resolved into a line of handprints, each sliding downward toward the scuppers as though someone had been dragged. Guthrum opened the forecastle hatch, a stench billowed, rot tinged with something acrid, metallic. Torches lit, we descended. Below lay the crew, or what remained. 3 bodies slumped against hull ribs, faces slack, lips blue. Their tunics and hair were soaked, but not with seawater. Their skin glistened oily. Egil knelt, touched a forehead, then recoiled. Cold, but not long dead. He lifted fingers to nostrils, eyes watered. Pitch? Tar? Brand examined a broken amphora at their feet. The shards reeked of pine tar mixed with safflower oil? Odd cargo for these waters. Tar for sealing, maybe, but the pungency suggested something brewed stronger. You recalled the tar canvas corpses. An uneasy thread tugged. In the stern storage you found more amphorae, intact, stamped with a seal. A stylized wake beneath a lily. None of us recognized the mark, but the lily suggested monastic origin. Another sect of the Quiet Wake, perhaps distribution arms disguised as traders. Before theories could ferment, Kraka shouted from deck, a raw alarm that ripped straight through planking. We scrambled up. Off Windweaver's port bow loomed 3 low silhouettes, triangular sails dark against glare, coastal galleys, oars gleaming like centipede legs. Painted on their lateen canvas was the same Lillywake emblem, and they were closing fast. Options flickered. We could flee. Windweaver outran most galleys in fair wind, but we had minimal sail set and lines still tethering us to the corpse cog. We could cut loose and hope, or parley. Sturmir chose neither. With a roar, he ripped the sailcloth from the serpent's skull and heaved it high on the yard. The pale fangs caught dawn's wan light like fiery beacons. Egil hurled a torch into the merchant's hold. Tar amphorae erupted in thick black blaze. Flames licked rigging as we shoved off, ropes snapping into the sea. The galleys faltered. You could almost taste their hesitation across the water, some recognition of their guardian now charred behind us and of its vanquishers before them. But zeal outran caution. Drumbeats thundered, oars dug, and they surged. "Archers!" you called, though shafts were scarce after earlier battles. Still, every man knocked and waited. The range closed. A volley hissed like angry wasps, thudding into shields raised along galley rails. A second reply peppered Windweaver's deck. 1 arrow thudded into Brand's shoulder. He grimaced, snapped the shaft, and kept yet numbers favored them. Within heartbeats, a boarding hook clanged onto our gunwale. Guthrum chopped it free, but another lodged abaft. Figures swarmed, hooded, faces blackened with tar war paint. Swords flashed, but their primary weapons were poles tipped with bronze crooks sputtering green flame. Wherever the flame touched deck, wood smoked and smoked until it sank inward, as though gnawed by acid. They meant to eat our ship alive. Sturmir bellowed to Kraka, "Serpent!" Kraka hauled on the yard, swinging the bleached skull until its jaws gaped over the nearest galley. You and two others heaved, tipping the trophy. It crashed down through their prow like a meteor, fangs piercing planks. Water spurted and men shrieked. One galley down. The second rammed us starboard, timbers splintering. Tar paint zealots flooded over their prow onto ours. Battle devolved into desperate knots, axes clashing, flames hissing where crooks found wood. You felt one brand sear your cloak hem. The smell of burning wool and pitch churned your gut. You answered with steel, pressing Rowan Amulet against the attacker's neck. His paint sizzled, skin blistering, and he reeled astern. Bran, pale but furious, drove a spear through two invaders, then collapsed to knees, blood sheeting his sleeve. Eagle dragged him back towards Sterncastle. You covered retreat, blade thudding bone. Amid carnage, a horn blast sounded, not ours. From beyond the melee, a new longship glided, sleek as an otter, prow adorned with twin raven heads. Sturmir's kin reinforcements he'd signaled by Raven Scroll days prior. Their arrival scattered the attacker's resolve. A volley of stones from sling-armed youths smashed crook torches, flames snuffed. The remaining galleys wheeled away, oars churning froth. Silence after violence rings louder than war. On Windweaver's deck, we counted our wounded, 7, none dead. The arrow in Bran's shoulder we eased free. Fortunately, it missed bone. Egil stitched under weak daylight while humming an old cradle tune, voice cracked but soothing. Sturmir convened a quick council with the new captain, his younger cousin Semund. News: the Lillywake galleys had been sighted pillaging villages along two fjords, abducting sick and healthy alike. Stories spoke of floating infirmaries where sins of breath were purged with fire and tar. The sect was spreading, cold clarity settled. We had struck but one node of a wider web. Unless severed at root, the Wake's doctrine would poison every sea lane. Samon proposed sailing straight to the archipelago where their flagship monastery reputedly anchored. Its location gleaned from a captured navigator, a hidden lagoon ringed by black basalt pillars, nicknamed the 12 Dead Priests. The plan formed swiftly. 3 longships against unknown defenses. Foolhardy odds, but stealth and surprise would weigh heavier than steel if played well. We patched Windweaver, redistributed arrows, and hoisted makeshift sails stitched from burnt cloth and remaining canvas. Supplies were thin, but a passing fishing smack, bribed with 2 silver rings, gave dried herring and barley bread enough for 4 days. That night, while the moon slunk behind shredded clouds, you addressed the weary crew, and beyond them, listeners curled by hearth glow and far future's comfort. "We have stumbled from plague to curse to zealot's fire," you said, voice low so only those leaning forward could catch it, and each step wove us deeper into the loom of fate. Thread by thread we're being summoned, not by glory but by duty to shield hearths that will never know our names. If you would bear witness as this tapestry tightens, tie your spirit to ours, click that like sigil, inscribe your questions on parchment below, and ring the bell that calls you back when fog returns. As the words settled, a hush, part reverence, part sheer bone-deep fatigue, blanketed deck. The wounded slept first, their breaths ragged lullabies. You slumped near the rail, letting the sea's dark hush rock you. Somewhere in that thin boundary between wakefulness and dream, you imagined the 12 dead priests rising like sentinels, basalt robes dripping with tide, and beyond them, a monastery aglow with lanterns of the greenest, loneliest light. Dawn found Windweaver slicing a narrow channel between ice-scabbed islets. Gulls returned, wheeling overhead, yet none cried. Bad omen. Seafarers say gulls silent mean a predator shadowing them. Kraka scanned, nothing but waves. Still, tension bristled. By midday, basalt pillars knifed up on the horizon. First 2, then 5, then the full dozen, each hundreds of feet tall, perfectly tapered, as though carved by giants with geometrical patience. The lagoon beyond lay cloaked in perpetual mist. At its center flickered lantern specks and one towering mast whose topmost yard bore a cross of bone. We lowered sails, shipped oars, and slid toward the pillar's shadow. Sound hushed again as if air thickened. Rowers breathed through clenched teeth. Even water seemed to muffle its slap. You guided by pole, measuring depth, surprisingly shallow for such a fortress. Semon's longship flanked to starboard. Sturmir's Raven's Fury took point. Crossing beneath the first pillar felt like passing through an unseen veil. Cold penetrated cloaks, not raw but spiritual, an unkind chill that threaded marrow. Torches doused, instead we moved by memory of hull, fingertips brushing planks for courage. Near the lagoon's heart we beached on a pebbled shoal. 40 paces inland loomed the monastery, a ringhouse of black stone, roofless, walls hung with tar-wept banners. The central courtyard glowed weird jade from braziers filled with seething pitch. Around each brazier stood hooded figures in rhythmic chant, arms raised, palms bleeding into flames. Feeding them, between those rings and us, lay ranks of prone bodies on wooden litters, all trussed in tar canvas but not yet sewn. Living victims awaiting transformation. Some writhed, moaning, others stared blankly at sky, resigned. A hush of resignation heavier than chains. Hearts hammered. Plans? No time. Sturmer hefted hammer, whispered, "Break the ring." We advanced. Rowans and steel out, silent until the first tar acolyte looked up, shock-widening eyes before Sturmer's hammer broke his jaw. Chaos flared, chants twisted into shrieks, but their shock advantaged us. We cut victims free. Ropes parted like straw under axes. Freed prisoners staggered seawards, some lifting fallen oars as weapons. A pitch brazier overturned, green fire spilling, igniting banners. Smoke rose thick, yet the sect's high priest remained unmoved. At courtyard center he stood tallest, face veiled behind bone mask of a drowned saint. In his hand shimmered a chalice of serpent-fang silver. He dipped it into burning pitch, withdrew a draught that glowed. With one fluid motion he hurled it toward you. Time slowed. The arc of luminous tar seared your vision, but then Egil lunged, Rowan amulet high. The pitch-struck pendant exploded into sparks, none touching skin. Roar of defiance rolled through our ranks. You rushed priest, his staff whipped, but Sturmir intercepted, shattering it. You grabbed his mask, tore away, beneath a face tattooed with lilies and wakes, eyes black inked to whites. He hissed, lunged with hidden blade. You parried, then pressed rowan wood to his forehead. Smoke, scream, he fell thrashing. As fire leapt from brazier to brazier, the monastery became inferno. Surviving zealots fled into lagoon, only to meet Semon's longship crew blocking shallows. No prisoner remained bound. We herded them aboard, 32 souls, fisherfolk, traders, even 2 children. At last, with smoke towers painting dawn behind basalt guards, we shoved off. Windweaver groaned under weight of rescued, but hope buoyed hulls more than salt foam ever could. Behind us, the ringhouse collapsed, tar flames sending up one final roar like a dying leviathan. Hours later, safe beyond stone sentinels, we regrouped. Brand's shoulder bled anew, Guthrum's side bruised purple. Egil bound Styrmir's cracked knuckles, but eyes sparkled tired triumph. The prisoners offered tearful thanks, pressing tokens, shell pendants, copper bracelets into our palms. One elderly woman kissed Brand's brow, his smile, timid, answered healing deeper than stitches. Night rose, calm and honest for once, a clean velvet sky dusted with stars. We laid blankets over freed folk, set small fires and braziers on deck, and passed around a single keg of ale saved for victory. Even Sturmir laughed, a rumble like distant surf, and told a story of Halfdan's first beard, which grew in 3 separate patches and made goats faint. Laughter rolled, rinsing weeks of dread. You found a quiet rail and spoke softly to invisible fellow travelers who've walked these plank words with you long beyond any sensible bedtime. Here we drift between past shadows and dawning peace, you tell them. If your lids are heavy, rest in the knowledge that tonight the seraph of Rowan stands watch and the lily wake burns no more. But if curiosity still sparks, leave a trace, tap the like stone, write the question that haunts you, and ring our night watch bell. One more chapter waits, a final stretch to harbor, and you won't want to miss the last echo of the saga. Dawn bled slowly across the rim of the sea, first a timid silver, then rose, then gold that seeped between the rat lines and warmed every half-frozen soul aboard Windweaver. You woke to the faint clink of ladles in the galley bucket and the drowsy hum of prisoners, now passengers, greeting another day of freedom. Someone had started brewing a thin barley porridge in an iron pot lashed beside the foremast. The smell was mostly smoke and seawater, but after weeks of rot-tainted barrels, it might as well have been a feast in Valhalla. We were 3 ships strong now, Raven's Fury leading with her twin raven prows proud again, Windweaver in the center, and Semon's Sleipnir shadowing the starboard flank like an eager younger sibling. The lagoon of the 12 dead priests lay far behind, just a smudge of smoke on yesterday's horizon, but its ruins seemed to cling to our hulls in subtle ways. Tar stains freckled the deck planks despite scrubbing. Scraps of the lily-wake banners drifted from rigging like torn moth wings. Even the sea sounded different, an undertone in every wave as though the burned monastery's stone were still cracking somewhere beneath the keel. Semond hailed across the chop, a grin splitting his beard. "Fair wind, cousins. 2 days more and ale barrels taller than me." The rescued fishwife Berta, her hair still matted with tar but eyes bright, raised a ladle in salute. Laughter scattered like gulls into the rigging. It felt brittle, yet right. A storm might break at any time, so you laugh when
Brand
you
emerged
can.
from below with his arm bound in fresh linen.
He'd been feverish in the night, dreaming of serpent bones and green fire, babbling in languages none of us spoke. But now he stood steady, though pale. He pressed the rowan pendant to his heart and exhaled, as if grounding himself on the deck's steady pulse. Egil joined you at the rail, rolling his shoulder, an ugly bruise visible where a zealot's staff had clipped him. "I keep counting the stripes the sea's given us," he said, "and still it finds blank skin." He squinted west toward faint blue haze that, if the charts were honest, ought to be the headland guarding our home fjord. "Think they'll believe us when we bring a serpent skull and 32 battered strangers?" "They'll have to," you answered. "Easier than believing the sea-sprouted bones to drink souls." Egil chuckled, then grew serious. "When we land, word of the wake will spread wider. They'll regroup somewhere we've never seen." He tapped the deck. "Maybe we killed a branch, not the root," you nodded. "But the branch bit deepest. If folk know it's poison now, they'll be ready." Below, Sturmir bellowed instructions to refit sails for a gentler breeze. His cracked knuckles were bandaged with strips torn from the lily banner, a delicious irony he relished. He caught your eye, gave a curt nod. The course held true. By midday, the wind died to a hush, leaving us to oars. Passengers offered to row. Sturmir accepted only a handful. Strength must return gradually. Guthrum, bruised but unbroken, supervised stroke. Every pull of the oarset creaked like old floorboards, yet the ships inched onward. The sea glassed over, a mirror sky beneath sky. In that uncanny stillness, voices carried. Some prisoners began a hymn, soft, wavering. It wasn't a chant of the lily-wake. This melody was older, an islander lullaby. Lyrics spoke of guiding whales and moss-covered stones that remembered your name. The song reached from Sleipnir across to us, and soon the rowers matched oar rhythm to its slow cadence. Even Sturmir hummed, but stillness never lasts. A sudden splash off port gave every heart a stutter. You peered. A sleek gray dorsal fin knifed the water. Another, then a half-dozen pilot whales escorting. Their presence in island lore meant safe passage. Berta whispered thanks to whichever gods still listened. The whales shepherded until late afternoon, then vanished south. As if in trade, wind returned, light from due west. Sails bloomed, oars shipped. Water flew under keels again. The second night after our escape, pale aurora unfurled in strips overhead, curtains of green and pink dancing silent. Deckhands stared up slack-jawed, some wept. Brand leaned against the gunwale beside you. "That first night, I feared light like this meant death," he murmured. "Now it feels cleansing. Skyfire chasing out the last smoke," you agreed. Semond hailed. "We'll make the headland by sunrise. Drink while we still have sea legs." Kegs were broached, thin ale for rationing, but sweet enough. Cups clinked. Freed prisoners recounted their capture stories. Nets by night, promises of healing that became chains. Each tale braided fury with relief. Sturmir swore to petition the thing to send warships south. Egil planned to copy the monastery's symbols onto warning carvings. Yet one question threaded every conversation. Why did the sect crave tar-wrapped bodies? We speculated. They believed disease was a demon housed in skin. Burning tar trapped it. Or perhaps their hooded leaders harvested something from the melted fat. No answer satisfied. You resolved to consult scholars, though you doubted scrolls would hold clearer light than the nightmares already scorched behind your eyelids. Dawn of the third day cracked gold over the headland. We rounded the point, gulls screaming welcome, or protest at intrusion. The fjord opened wide, studded with knuckles of rock and a scatter of fishing skiffs hauling nets. At sight of our battered prows, villagers left nets half-hauled and rowed to intercept. From Raven's Fury's deck, Sturmir lifted the serpent skull high on a pike. Gasps rippled across water. As we approached the pier town of Skaldvik, church bells rang, part alarm, part summons. Children raced along the shore, pointing. The dock burst with bodies, traders, fishwives, Jarl's envoys. Lines were tossed, boots thudded onto planks. The reunion tasted bittersweet. Families rushed captives they recognized, sobbing, laughing. Others we freed had no kin here. Villagers still wrapped them in cloaks, led them to fires. You barely had time to breathe before Council Elder Ragna strode up, her braid gray as winter rope. She eyed the skull, then you. "Inside," she ordered. In the longhouse the story spilled. The ghost fleet sparks, the ossuary reef, the cursed fountain, the serpent, the lily wake, the burning monastery. Council faces shifted from disbelief to horror to awe. When Sturmir laid the serpent fangs on the table, even skeptics Elder Ragna spoke last. "What is proof without warning? The wake may root elsewhere, as yew sprouts from fallen limb. We must carve runestones, send heralds, arm ships." She fixed you with flint eyes. "Will you captain one of them?" You felt raw splinters beneath nails from weeks of rigging and wanted nothing more than sleep in a bed that didn't roll. Yet memory of tar orchards choking innocent lungs stirred. "Aye," you said. "But first we bury our dead." 3 days of funerals followed. 14 cairns raised for those lost at the ossuary reef, 6 more for victims who died of sickness aboard. Each cairn crowned with driftwood rune of rowan and whalebone, so land and sea would guard them. Brand sang a lay, voice still hoarse but strong, of water that forgets but stone that remembers. Children listened wide-eyed. Some would later carve stories in sticks, mimicking his cadence. On the 4th day, a storm brought sleet again, the same cold needles that had drummed your eyelids before the final push. Under that sleet, the council gathered to ratify next steps. Sturmir and Saemund would refit their ships, train new oars. You, Egil, and Guthrum were tasked with mapping rumored coves where lilies had surfaced on trade bales. Brand insisted on coming. The journey had forged him anew. Elder Ragna agreed, but assigned a healer to travel with us, a stern woman named Solveig, whose salves smelled of pine and vinegar. Preparation filled another week, scraping hulls, patching sails, forging arrowheads from donated iron. Freed prisoners healed and chose paths. Some returned to islands, others swore fealty to Skaldvik's Jarl, eager to defend new home. Berta stayed in town to run a fish smoke shed, promising to feed any orphaned crew who returned. One dusk you climbed the bluff above harbor, alone except for gulls. Below, Windweaver bobbed at anchor, fresh pitch gleaming. The serpent's skull now hung over the Jarl's gateyard, a stark warning shape. You thought of the voyage's cost. Blood, fear, sleepless nights recited like prayer beads. Were we better for having faced the dark? Or merely changed, our innocence charred like the banners we burned? Footsteps rustled. Egil appeared, cloak flapping. He handed a flask, sweet thyme mead. "For courage," he said, though his eyes asked a deeper question. You drank, warmth flooding ribs. "Ready to carve another scar?" you asked. He smirked. "My blank skin dwindles." Below, torches ringed the pier. Sturmir's booming laugh carried up. Solveig's healer tent glowed amber. Sleipner's prow shone like a polished Egil stretched a hand to the sky where the first aurora tendril blossomed. "Whatever tomorrow shapes, we'll step into it together." He clapped your shoulder. "Come, there's a council of children demanding a tale before bed." You followed him down, heart easing. That night in the great hall, you recounted the saga. You, the unseen watchers who have sailed every word, and the crowd huddled beneath antler-braced rafters. You spoke of ghost fog thicker than sleep, of water that turned to poison, of serpent bones and lily fire, of courage found in rowan pendants and strangers' Candles guttered low, yet not a listener drifted. When you finished, hush lingered until a child whispered, "Will the sea be safe now?" You knelt to meet his worried gaze. "Safer," you answered, "because you'll remember, and memory is the first net that catches shadows." You turned to the invisible hearths beyond the hall, every viewer rocking in a modern chair, every half-asleep wanderer using these words as pillow. "If the tide of this story has cradled you into calm," you said, "gift us the kindness of a like press. Let your thoughts loose in the comments. Tell us where in the saga your heartbeat quickened, and lash your dreams to ours by ringing the subscribe bell, so you'll be aboard the moment our next voyage casts off." Egil chimed, "No rune or rowan saves a man alone. Community does. Your voice is an oar. Don't leave it idle." Laughter bubbled. Candles were snuffed. The hall emptied into gentle dark. You finally slipped into the guest cot allotted to heroes, though heroes seldom sleep easily. But exhaustion silenced doubts. In dream you walked a shoreline where basalt pillars lay toppled, and children built sand castles between them, no longer afraid. Gulls cried, not warning, but joy. Water lapped harmless at your boots, clear, with no serpent coil beneath. Morning's light through shutter slats woke you to Solveig prodding with willow bark tea. Windweaver's sailcloth snapped outside, impatient for fresh horizon. A voyage ends, another begins. But this tale, draws its last breath here, dear viewer. Let its hush settle over you like a wool blanket warmed by ember glow. Drift now. Should the dark stir with echoes of green flame, remember the rowan, remember the whales, remember that courage is simply fear that has found a hand to hold. When you wake, we'll be somewhere beyond the next headland, charting tales for another night. Until then, sleep deep, dream kinder seas, and know you are counted among crew.